Empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men, shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men to live extraordinary lives. Shatter the stereotypes. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men to live extraordinary lives.
Welcome to Shatter the Stereotypes, where the intention is to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. This show is based on the simple idea that every Black man is capable of creating inner peace, dynamic health, great relationships, and financial abundance. Therefore, we provide insights and strategies to educate, motivate, and inspire Black men to reach their full potential and create the life of their dreams. So if you're ready for some high-octane motivation and inspiration that supports and empowers you to live the life you were born to live, get ready to shatter the stereotypes so you can build a life that lights you up and positively impacts the world. So now, let's shatter the stereotypes with your host, Coach Michael Taylor.
Hello and welcome to the Shatter the Stereotypes podcast, where my intention is to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. You see, there's never been a shortage of Black male role models. There's only been a lack of exposure of those role models in mainstream media. So my intention is to showcase and highlight Black men who are doing remarkable things in the world. And my guest tonight is doing just that. His name is Brien Gatewood, and he is the founder and lead consultant at Gatewood Strategies. He's an expert in setting up and running nonprofit organizations, and he co-founded an organization that mentors young men in Baltimore, Maryland called the Initiative Baltimore. So welcome to Shatter the Stereotypes, Don. How are you this evening?
Thank you so very much. I am doing wonderful, and I'm super excited to be here to talk about this important topic.
All righty. So before we jump into your work, though, let's start off with a few icebreakers. So first of all, tell us where you're from.
Well, while I live right outside of the Washington, D.C. area in Maryland, I'm from Detroit, Michigan. That's right. I'm from 8 Mile. And anybody that knows anything about Detroit know about 8 Mile. And so that's where I'm from, born and raised. And West Side, to be specific. The West Side is the best side, as they say. And that's where I'm from.
There you go. So whenever I hear 8 Mile, first thing that pops up is Eminem and
Yeah.
the movie.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually, where I grew up is probably about 4 miles down the street from where he lived. He lived on the suburban side of 8 Mile, because 8 Mile is like a dividing line in Michigan. So if you're on the south side of it, then it's Detroit. But if it's the north side, then it's a suburb. So it's the dividing line between the city and the suburbs. And it definitely has a lot of symbolic meaning when you think about the history of Detroit.
Gotcha. So tell us a little bit about your family, whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Absolutely. Well, I am a person who, I guess you could say, I grew up as an only child in the household. However, I do have a sister. It's just that my sister is a lot older than I, so we never grew up together, and she's on my dad's side. So I grew up as the traditional single child in the household with my mom primarily, and then of course spending time with my dad on the weekend. So that was the basic foundation of growing up for me. Definitely being from Detroit, enjoyed a lot of outdoor activities, a lot of big three, just a lot of fun things that the city had to offer, and definitely found myself enjoying music, playing the saxophone, and enjoying things like public speaking and all of that sort of thing, which kind of led me to going to Wayne State University, where I got my degree in public relations. And so that's just a little bit about my background growing up. Definitely from a low socioeconomic neighborhood, so things at times were tight, but definitely we made it work, and we were very scrappy, and definitely learned a lot. In my time, growing up on the West Side.
All righty. So name a woman who has inspired you to be who you are.
Gosh, my biggest inspiration. Well, name a woman. Well, there's a few. I would say, obviously, number one is my mother, because I grew up in the household with her and she reared me. So she would have to be my number one, clearly. However, outside of my mother, I would have to say Serena Williams. I think she's someone that everybody knows, but she is my biggest, one of my biggest inspirations, man or female, coming up in a neighborhood similar to mine, and
Yeah.
definitely trying to do something that was up against all odds, and just with the right leadership and the right mindset and attitude, and a never giving up, failure not being an option. As a person who I've looked up to and continue to look up to this day, I think she's awesome.
So
So
did
she's
you
one of my biggest role models.
so did you watch the movie King William?
Of course, I saw the movie. I was actually one of the first people in the movie theater. I ran out and grabbed one of my friends and we got to go see the movie. And so we went and we saw it, and it lived up to my expectations. I thought the actresses were beautiful. They really reflected Serena and Venus well, and I thought Will did one heck of a job, and so did the mother as well. I
Yeah.
thought she was amazing too. It was a wonderful movie.
Yeah, wonderful film. Absolutely. I love movies. Movies is my thing. Now I'd like you to name a man that you look up to and admire.
A man that I look up to, I would definitely, of course, say my dad first. He's no longer with us. He passed away, but he definitely is my favorite person on the planet and my biggest inspiration. Hard worker, just a nice man, and really a wonderful example for me. In addition to my dad, I would say I have a lot of role models out there. Let's see. Who would I want to talk about right now? I would say, I'll just leave it there with my dad. I mean,
There
he
you
he
go.
was a wonderful role model. He was a hard worker. He taught me really what it's like to be in the face of adversity. I mean, he was a little bit older, so he grew up in a farm town, not very many people of color. Fought in a war that was segregated, the Korean War, and still was focused and determined to represent his country, despite the fact that his country wasn't treating him the way he deserved to be treated, but took that as an opportunity to open up a small business as a construction worker, employed, tens and tens of black men, the first black man to have a construction company in Michigan. So he was a pretty awesome man, and I look up to him very much so.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Now, if you were trapped on an island for 30 days and you could only take one book, what book would you take with you?
Oh my gosh. Wait, you said 30 days?
Yeah, you got 30 days. You're on an island. You can only take one book. What book would you take?
Oh my gosh, these are really tough questions, especially this one. I am a book reader, but I'm trying to think about which one would I take for 30 days? Gosh, that's such a tough question. Let's see. Gosh, I well, I can't even it would I can't think right now. I would say something from Brene Brown. I like her a lot. I
Yeah,
think she's awesome. I like her philosophy. I like, the awareness that she has, um, the growth, the mindfulness that place that she speaks from. So I think if I chose a book from her, it would be a book worth to read. So I'll say something from Brene Brown.
there you go. Yeah, her work with vulnerability has been amazing. Really
Yeah, she's awesome.
changing our perceptions of what that means. So yeah, great,
Absolutely.
great choice. Now, I mentioned that I love movies, which I do.
Mhm.
So do you like movies?
Oh gosh, I am a huge movie person. In fact, I went to see Superman, Batman with Lisa
Yeah.
Bonet and daughter, and so playing Catwoman. So yeah, it was a really good movie. So I go to the movies about 2 days a week.
Oh, nice,
Yep.
nice. Now, if I gave you a magic wand, you
hmm
could create anything your heart desired. What would your life look like 5 years from now?
If you gave me a magic wand and I could use it, what would my life look like now,
5 years from
5 years from now?
now.
What I would really like to do, I mean, 5 years from now, if I can, wave a magic wand, aside from being even more financially stable and having the basics that I love travel similar to you. So, provided I can have the home that's comforting and the car and, being able to travel still, something that I really would want besides those more personal, things is I really would want to continue to have a big impact on people, especially people who look like me and especially young men. for me, that's really, really important. I feel like we are an amazing people. And I feel like we have an opportunity to steer our community, our young community, in ways that we've yet to see. And I would just love to have an opportunity to grow programming in a meaningful way that really connects with the young men who are most in need and to be as transformative as possible. I would love to be at the helm of having large and meaningful programs that can have a major impact. And that's what I would love. If I can wave my wand, I would want to see that. I want to see every young person that, especially that looks like me, whatever gap that's in their life, if possible, help them close that gap so they can achieve what they were intended to achieve. And that's greatness, is what I feel. And that's what I would really want to do.
Great vision. Great vision. Now, as a man who happens to be Black, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future in general? Where do you fall on the spectrum between optimism and pessimism for the future?
I'm very optimistic because I see, the thing about knowing history is it really helps you keep the current and the future in perspective. Against all odds, people that look like me, they have been successful throughout all of the push and pull, throughout all of the injustice, the drama. Here we are today with so much more opportunity to grow and advance. But I have to acknowledge the hard work, the steadfastness, and the encouragement that we've no doubt had to get to where we are today. And I believe that we'll continue to grow and to develop and to take our place. Despite whatever oppositions that may exist, despite whatever coordinated efforts that are to be developed and that are currently in place, all of those will be defeated in the end, and we will take our place. And I believe as long as we keep our eye on the prize, we'll get there sooner than later. So no matter how murky the water is, I believe that we have what it takes to sojourn and to take our place. And we just got to just keep on moving.
There you go. I'm right there with you, my friend. My friends actually gave me a nickname. They call me Michael Happy Ass Taylor. Because I like to think of myself as an irrepressible optimist with a passion for the impossible. That's my tagline. So I'm right there with you in terms of optimism. And at
Right.
the same time, I don't deny all the challenges that are out there. We all know what they are.
Hmm.
Again,
Absolutely.
I still maintain an optimistic attitude for the future. Now,
Absolutely.
I wrote a book titled The Cure for Onlyness, a Black Man's Guide to Joy, Passion, and Purpose.
Hmm.
And in the book, I talk about the unique challenges that we as Black men have to deal with when we're in environments as the only people of color.
Hmm.
So I know you've had that experience in your own life. So tell me, how
Hmm.
do you navigate those types of situations?
Well, what I know for sure is that at the end of the day, we all, our culture, our color, our race, I mean, we do have differences in color and race. That's obvious. However, what I always remember is I am no different in terms of my capacity, my capability, my preparedness, and my value. And so for me, I always remember that who I am and what I bring to the table, is much more than what you can see. And I believe that the other men and the other women, whether they look differently than me or not, I mean, it's my place to be in the room just as much as theirs, if not more, because I'm of the belief that I may have gone through more challenges to even get in that room. And so I believe that the fact that I'm there means that I'm supposed to be there. And the fact that I'm there represents obstacles that I face. And so there's no question in my mind that I'm supposed to be there. And I just believe that we have to remember, regardless of the facts that people are different than us or the rooms may not always look like us, but that we deserve to be there. And we have to feel that way and know that to be true in order to show up and to bring forward what we really can bring forward. Because on the other end, if you are super concerned about the fact that the other people are different, you may miss out on the opportunity to show up in your full person, in your full self, because you're fearful, you're afraid, you maybe even think you're not good enough, you're not supposed to be there. And I think just the opposite. You are supposed to be there. And so I think that it's okay to acknowledge the differences because that can really bring value to how you approach the situation of the conversation, but not allowing that difference to make you feel anything different than you're supposed to be there. So for me, that it's important to just remember that those men or women are no different in terms of their preparation than I am. And that's how I look at it. And that has helped me be comfortable in spaces with people who are different than me. Because I honestly think we have more in common than we have different. I just think that. And so it helps me not have this anxiety like that we don't have anything in common, because we do.
Yeah. Yeah. I've always looked at myself as a representative of Black folk. So when I get on a stage and I'm the only Black person there, in no way am I intimidated. I
Hmm.
am no fear. There's no fear because I know what I bring to the table. And I
Correct.
know that I have an opportunity to change the perception about Black men by how I show up.
Correct.
So when I show up in my full confidence and my knowledge and wisdom, I can literally change people's minds about how they see Black men. And
Right.
I've always looked at that as an opportunity to do so. So that's just kind of how I see it.
Absolutely.
So now I'd like you to introduce yourself professionally. So tell the audience about what you do.
Well, professionally, I have so many different things that I enjoy. Probably the most recent thing that is a priority for me is similar to you. I have a podcast. It's called the Leadership and Professional Development with Don Gatewood. The Leadership and Professional Development with Don Gatewood podcast. I'm sorry. And anyway, the goal of that is to make sure that people have the tools and information they need to accomplish their professional goals and their leadership goals. I believe, Michael, that we all have a lot of dreams and potential and ability, but sometimes there may be a gap between where we are and where we're trying to go. Well, my hope is that we can learn those lessons, interviewing, resume writing, managing teams, conflict resolution, and whatever else that falls into that leadership and professional development. We'll explore those so people can get the information they need in order to keep moving toward their goals. So that's what that's about. But before I got to that point, I had spent over 23 years in the nonprofit space. After I graduated Wayne State, as I mentioned to you earlier, I entered into the nonprofit world where I've remained for 22, 23 years. And although my area of focus has been workforce development, I've worked with people who are coming out of prison. I've worked with people living with homelessness, people who are living in tough environments, people living in DC, Detroit, whatever, who have barriers. And what my job has been is to help them overcome barriers so that they could achieve their professional and leadership goals. And I've instructed, I've created programs, and I've done all those sorts of things. So that has been my experience, and it's the capacity that I continue to work in, even with people who are 55 and above. But aside from that, you talked about the Initiative Baltimore, which is an organization that I founded. It's a nonprofit for young men, 11 years old to 17 years old, living in Baltimore. Our goal is to create the next generation of leaders. And it's that simple. I don't do it alone. I do it with Christian Gant, who is the co-founder. I do it with the board members. I do it with parents. I do it with a great community of Baltimore. But collectively, we work together to make sure that our young men have tools and resources and positive affirmations to achieve their goals. And I think they're all destined for greatness. Despite the circumstances, there is no doubt every single young man is brilliant. And so those are just three things that I spend my time doing. Of course, the podcast, the Initiative Baltimore, and then, working my 9 to 5 are things that keep me pretty busy.
Gotcha. Now, so you attended Wayne State University, you went to
I did.
Georgetown University, and the University of Maryland,
That's true.
where you received your bachelor's and your master's degree. So first of all,
Yep.
what were your degrees in? What were your specialties?
Correct. So the Wayne State University, that's public relations, which is a communications degree. And then Georgetown and University of Maryland. Well, University of Maryland was a master's in um, nonprofit management, and then Georgetown was human resources management. So those are the areas that I, focused on that no doubt continue to inform, how I move and, how I make decisions. So I think that the degrees that I got actually made sense to what I've done and what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, that's actually pretty unique because I don't remember. where I read this, but there was a statistic that said 75% of the people that receive degrees don't have jobs in which they receive their degrees.
Right, right. And that is, I'm not even surprised by that statistic at all.
Yeah.
I have worked in every whatever degree that I have, I've worked in that capacity at one form or another. However, when you grow in advance, like founding organizations, and when you are a leader as a CEO, which is what my current position is at the nonprofit, you essentially are responsible for all things. And so at that point, everything that comes into play because you have to oversee and be strategic with the organizational's direction. Because if anything goes wrong, at the end of the day, you are responsible for it. And so that is the type of mindset that you got to have. And when you have that mindset, you realize that you need to know what's going on in all those departments, even if that's not what you're doing day to day. So,
Now I'm curious though, when you were in high school,
mhm.
what were you dreaming about becoming? What did you want to do when you were in high school?
So the first thing I wanted to become was to be the next entertainer, to be Usher. Okay, I wanted to be Usher Part Two. These are my confessions. But after I realized that I could not dance or sing, nor did I have the looks or anything else that Usher has, I realized that that probably was not a viable path. So I decided to go to the university, Wayne State, where I went on a journey like so many other young folks, figuring myself out, no clear path. But I learned a lot along the way. And that's how I ended up, making a decision to go into communications because I realized that I had some communication interest. And so when I got my first job or my second job, it was at a nonprofit, but it was in the communications department. So that was the thing. My first job was I gave the tours at the organization. I was responsible for, a lot being the face of the organization, but it was at a nonprofit. And so then I learned about the nonprofit. So that's how that shift happened. I started with the communication, but at a nonprofit. So it allowed me to kind of see what nonprofits were all about. And that's where my love developed and it continued to flourish.
So let's talk a little bit about nonprofits
Hmm.
because nonprofits are a way of making a difference and an impact in the world.
Sure.
So for those who are watching this and may not understand the mechanics, if you will, the difference between a nonprofit and a profitable company,
Hmm.
give us a little insight on what's the main difference between the two, a nonprofit and a profitable company.
Right. So in order for an organization to be a nonprofit, it's actually a designation from the IRS. So a nonprofit is typically a 501c3. Most nonprofits are 501c3s. But that there are other designations. For example, you have 501c4s, 501c2s. So there's different designations out there, like certain if you belong to a sorority or if it's like some different type of uh, men's group or women's group. Sometimes those are not 501c3s or 501c2s or 4s. But the most nonprofits, when you think of nonprofit, they are 501c3. And in order for you to get that designation, you have to submit the name of your organization, the mission of it, your board of directors to the IRS. They process the information. If it meets their standards, they issue you a EIN number and make you a official 501c3. So that is the first step to becoming a official nonprofit organization. You have to go through the government. That's number one. Whereas any organization that you develop, they don't go through the government. You can create an organization, as you see fit, and there's no government requirement per se. Another major difference between nonprofits and for profits, generally speaking, is nonprofits oftentimes are mission driven. What that means is their impact is not about making money per se. Usually, nonprofits have identified an issue, whether it's HIV/AIDS, whether it's homelessness, whether it's education, whether it's childcare, whether it's whatever the topic, saving the whales or the planet. And so what they do is they develop an organization around the issue that they've identified and they work toward resolving or fixing that issue. And the way that they're able to do that is because they usually get grants. And grants are, pockets of money that you apply for. And if you get approved for it, then you get the money. Or you get individual donations where people donate their own money, or even companies may sponsor an event. And so nonprofits typically are able to pay salaries and operate through grants, through individual donations, as well as sponsorships. However, with a company, they usually are selling something. Even if you're a hairdresser, what you're selling is doing someone's hair. So you do the service and then they pay you. Or you are selling soda, or you're selling cell phone covers. You create the product, you sell it, and then you get the money. Nonprofits typically aren't selling anything for profit. And if they are selling something, it's meant to go back into the organization to continue the mission. It's not meant for profit. It's meant for the organization, not for dividends and making the company into this big entity that organizations have the capacity to be.
So, what are some of the mistakes people make when starting a nonprofit? Because I know, as you mentioned, nonprofits are generally driven by a mission. So we're trying
Correct.
to resolve some social issue or something. So let's say I'm sitting at home one night and I see an issue and I go, man, I want to do something about that. So I'm going to launch me a nonprofit. What are some from your experience, what are some of the biggest mistakes people make when launching a nonprofit?
I think the biggest mistake people make out the gate is just believing that because they have an idea or they have a passion, that automatically means that they should form a nonprofit. I think a lot of nonprofits from the beginning is a mistake, because you can have a issue, a passion, or a concern, but I would suggest that after you develop that passion or concern, find out what other organizations that exist that deal with that passion and concern. And before you decide that you want to go and create one, perhaps you can volunteer to find out what the issue is and how they resolve the problems. You can also learn what limits they have and what issues that they experience trying to manage that very thing that you're interested in. And once you're volunteering, you can learn, you can understand the issue, and then you can better assess if actually starting an organization is for you. Because what I believe, what I know is that people wake up one day and have the wonderful idea, well intentioned, but develop an organization and not fully understand what it will take to push the mission forward, the resources, the time, the effort. Because again, when you're starting a nonprofit, you ain't got no money, you have nothing. You have no staff, you have nothing. So everything is going to fall on you or the two or three people who has come up with this. And if no one understands the issue intimately, if no one has volunteered, if no one has assessed the amount of time that it's going to take, I believe that to be one of the biggest issues people take by not learning about the issue before even deciding to move forward.
Yeah, that's a really great point, because a lot of people have these big ideas, these big dreams, and they may even have money, but they don't understand the mechanics of running a nonprofit. And
Correct.
so it can be a huge detriment to the success of the organization because we don't have the understanding. And here's a perfect example. So I launched a nonprofit, and it took me 7 years to come up with the money to launch my nonprofit.
Right.
I knew nothing about launching a nonprofit. I just knew I had an idea that I wanted to make a difference with. Okay. So when I finally got the money, what I didn't know, because I'd never worked for a nonprofit, I was from the profit sector, as an
Correct.
entrepreneur. I didn't know that I needed to figure out how to create a constant revenue stream of donations to keep the organization going.
Correct.
In my little mind, I'm thinking, well, this is such a great idea. People are just going to throw money at me because it's going to make
No,
a difference. It doesn't work that way.
no,
You
it doesn't
have
work
to
that way.
have a strategy. You have to have a network, because keeping the money flowing is probably the greatest challenge a nonprofit will run up against, because
Right.
we're constantly seeking funding. So with that being said, let's
hmm
talk a little bit about fundraising.
Correct. So here is the thing to think about though. Before you can even get into fundraising, there's a few key things that need to be in place in order for the fundraising to be successful. People are only going to want to donate and give to an organization that they believe to be honest, that they believe to be credible, and that they believe that if I give this person my money or my resources or my grant, that they're going to handle it with responsibility, they're going to handle it with integrity, and I feel confident that it will be managed fiscally responsibly. So an organization has to think about, are we even in a position? Have we even developed honesty and outcomes and a visibility and a website and social media presence and all the things that people may want to go to first to see, what are you doing? How are you doing it? Where are the pictures? Where's the video? Where's the testimonials? Where can we see this up front? So all of that has to be in place first. So a person say, okay, I believe that this is a believable and trustworthy organization. Now I'm ready to think about how I might be able to support you. But this is my first time supporting you, so I'm going to give you a little bit, see how it goes, and then we'll move from that. So that's what I mean by just developing a relationship with the individual donor. But that also influences fundraising as well, because if you do special events where you are wanting people to attend your events, so help you raise money, they have to believe in the event. You have to put in the groundwork to identify these people, to massage these people, to communicate, and to put events on that they want to attend. So there's a lot of groundwork that goes into it. And then when we talk about grants, same thing. You may want to write a grant for $100,000, and they may be willing to give it to you as long as you can provide them with the information of your impact, your mission, how the mission will, how you've executed so far, what you plan to do with the money, any examples of your money management, your social media campaign, and all these things matter before anyone will be willing to fund you or give you anything. So you have to take the time to put that in place first. Now, of course, you don't have a whole bunch of money in the beginning, so it can't look like American Red Cross because you don't have that kind of money. But you have to start somewhere and have, on a smaller scale, things in order and grow to scale. I think that a lot of people have an ambition of being something bigger within a matter of 2 or 3 years, which may not be realistic. You have to start from the ground and grow and be strategic and be realistic. It is not going to be big overnight. And that is also the second mistake that people make. The
Yeah,
first being not doing their research.
yeah, because it's funny because again, I had this big dream, this great vision, and no experience, which is huge because starting a nonprofit is kind of like getting credit. You
Hmm.
can't get credit if you don't already have credit.
Correct.
But when you get credit and you have good credit, it's easy to get more credit.
Hmm.
So getting money is kind of the same way with a nonprofit. When you, like you said, start small, get a few dollars under your belt, prove that you can be fiscally responsible with that
Correct.
small amount, and then continue to grow it. But it's that the initial challenge is to, just like credit, if you don't have it, it's hard to get it. And so you
Correct.
have to figure out a way to get it. And even if it's small amounts, it's at least showing that you've enrolled someone else in your vision. They believe in your vision, and it makes it a little easier to get money from other people when someone has already given you money for it. Would you agree with that?
No, absolutely, absolutely. Being able to establish credibility is important. I think that people who put in some groundwork in the beginning, like we talked about earlier, volunteering, meeting other people who have similar passions, engaging with them, supporting them, those are all foundational steps that you can make. That if you decide to move forward with your idea, you have the momentum of a network of people who are familiar with you and may even vouch for you. But I think a lot of people, again, have great ideas and say, I'm just going to do it, not understanding that it's just like running for office. You may technically have the skills to do the job per se, But running for office is so much more than just having the skill. And it's the same with a nonprofit. It's so much more than technically being able to manage a book. You have to have the goodwill of the people, and they have to believe in you. And it
Absolutely.
takes time.
Absolutely. So, with that being said, what would be some creative ways
Mhm.
that you might, as a nonprofit, raise funds? What may be some unique ways? Because again, I'm an optimist, and what I
Mhm.
see is there are so many more opportunities now for funding than when because see, I started my nonprofit back in the 90s. And
Mhm.
that was before the internet really. And it was a matter of just knocking on doors and enrolling people in my vision and what they were doing. But now you've got things like Kickstarter and GoFundMe, and you got all these different organizations now that are giving you creative ways to raise money. So what are some of the creative ways you can think of that someone might be able to fund a nonprofit?
Right. I want to just acknowledge what you said. You do have these interesting tools like Kickstarter and all these different apps that allow people to, you know, raise money. They're a vehicle where people can donate money and you can get the money collected through their vehicles. But again, in order for any of these creative things to work, you have to have the relationships with the people. And I want to stress that again only because Michael, people sometimes want to bypass the process and want to just steamroll into the good part. And that none of this works that way. You cannot steamroll into the good part. Let me say that again. You cannot steamroll into the good part. You have to put in the work. But once you have put in the work, I think there's a number of different opportunities out there to raise money, but I think that it depends on the relationships that you have. I'll give you an example with us. We had a fundraiser where we partnered with a local bar in Baltimore, Maryland, and they were willing to not only give us a space in their restaurant, but they gave us a certain percentage off of the food. They made a special menu for us, and a certain percentage of all the food purchased between a certain time they gave to us, and they allowed us to do whatever we wanted to generate traffic into their facility, and they even made a donation on top of it. So that fundraiser isn't going to bring in $50,000, but a fundraiser like that could bring in $1,600. And so that is the type of thinking that you have to do when you're starting off. You have to think about who is the who are the founding members or supporters of the organization? Are they members of local fraternities or sororities? Do they have networks of people? And how might we leverage the people that are in our network? So I think that part is essential, leveraging the people so that when you put the event together, we have a sure group of people that's going to support it. So I think that partnering with other organizations is a key way for a new nonprofit, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a local um, a local um, showroom where they do concerts and they're willing to give a certain amount to a ticket. I think those are excellent ways to for a new nonprofit to consider with fundraising.
So,
Um, and let me say this too, though. I mean, it also boils down to the skill set of the people. See, not you got to have the skill, the communication skills, the social media savvy, being able to record the videos, to advertise. So it's a matter of skill set as well.
so in terms of fundraising, and again,
Mhm.
I think, for example, when I first started, I could see my vision and how
Mhm.
I wanted to, to change the world and
Mhm.
all of that. And that is huge. And matter of fact, I still have the vision. But as you mentioned, you take baby steps.
Mhm.
And so it may be that you get $1,000 here or
Mhm.
$50, whatever it is. You start small and you just build on that. You
Correct.
and as you're building on it, like it creates that snowball effect. It starts to roll and it starts to build up, but you got to start somewhere. But I
Right.
do want you to talk a little bit about grants.
Mhm.
So when you're starting a nonprofit, how does that grant system work? Can you explain that a little bit?
Right. So it's important for any nonprofit. You should have a three-tier fundraising plan. Okay, so we have already talked about how do we get individuals to donate money. I've talked about things like partnering with restaurants or partnering with local fraternities and sororities, doing events, sponsoring somebody at a you know, marathon, all these creative ways to donate or to get money on a smaller scale. That's one way. The second way, of course, is the sponsorship, getting a company to sponsor an event that you have. Instead of you're paying for it, they will sponsor that event. However, the third way, as you just mentioned, is the grants. And grants are an amazing opportunity to get money. There are grants out there that's worth $1 million. There are some 100,000, some 50, and then some that's only 5,000. So there are organizations, there are people, philanthropic foundations who have large amounts of money, rich people who have decided that part of their money, their endowment, is going to go toward nonprofit causes. And they want to give it to the community, but you have to prove that you have a mission that is worthy of the money. You have to demonstrate the impact of your organization, and you have to answer their questions to help them be confident that you are going to be a good spirit of the dollars if you get it. So, in order to find a grant, there's a number of ways to find them. Again, there are foundations out there, all kind of foundations. You've heard them. You got people that are in entertainment. They have their own foundations, but the bigger foundations are the ones that's been around for 100, 200 years, where they have $100 million endowment, and every year they give a certain amount out to different nonprofits. And you simply have to identify the foundations. They're out there, and identify the grants that are specific for your cause. Because there are some grants that are specific for education, others that are specific for, you know, uh, let's say HIV and AIDS. There's some that's specific for poverty. So you have to find the grants that's specific for your cause. And then you have to ask yourself, how much money do you really need to run your organization? And find the grant that is reasonable to your scale. If you are just getting started and you're trying to write a grant for $200,000, $300,000, that's already a mistake because you are new. You haven't proven anything and you don't have an infrastructure to justify you needing that amount. Furthermore, you won't even be able to answer the questions satisfactorily because you don't have the foundation or the history yet to even answer those questions. That's already a mistake. However, what you will want to do is find something that's a little bit smaller and that is meant for a newer nonprofit. A lot of these grants are looking to fund people who are already established. They're not looking to fund somebody who's brand new because they want to know that they want to see a track record that you can do well by the money. Because you have heard, Michael, some of these bad examples. It's only a few, but all it takes is a few of people who get this money and act a fool with it. And then the people say, you can't trust them. You can't trust them. And you and I know it's only a couple, but all it takes is a couple to make the whole thing blow out of proportion. So now what these grant, managers do is they say, hey, we need to make sure that you can prove to us best way that you can that you're going to be a good steward of this money. And so for a newer nonprofit, your options are going to be limited, but there are grants out there that are willing to work with newer organizations. They are smaller, the money is going to be smaller, but they are willing to work with newer organizations as well.
Now, with that being said, though, how does a new nonprofit determine, for example, salaries? So if you're launching a nonprofit and you're the only guy with a dream, and
Mm-hmm.
you're wanting to go out there and make a difference, how does the person decide the expenses? For example, if you're going to set up a small office with your new organization, how is there a chart? Is there a metrics that says as a nonprofit you should only make certain amount of money? How would you determine that?
No, no. I mean, a lot of people who are starting nonprofits, they don't make any money. Oftentimes the first year, first 2 years, first 5 years, a lot of people who start from the ground up, they cannot make any money because they don't have money to pay salaries. You
Right.
have to have grants, sponsorship, and individual donations that allow you to not only pay for your programming, but then whatever is left over, you have to pay for administration, the internet, paper, and then what's left, it may not even be enough for a a salary if you're starting out. Again, we're not talking about American Red Cross. We're not talking about Goodwill. We're not talking about the Urban League, organizations that are founded with grants on top of grants and have a whole structure. We're talking about a brand new person. A brand new person shouldn't even be thinking about a salary if they are opening up a nonprofit. And if that's what you're thinking, don't open it, because you are going to be sadly mistaken and hurt when you realize that you've been working for 1 year or two and you're not being able to make a salary, because you're not going to, because you're new, you're still working, you're establishing yourself. So a person starting a nonprofit should not be believing that they are going to be making a salary, because you are mistaken.
And again, that's a very, very important part. It's something that if you're thinking about starting a nonprofit, you've got to think about this, because that's where the challenges begin. Because
Yes,
if your focus is on making a difference, that's where your attention needs to be.
correct.
Thinking about how can I make an impact first. If
Right,
I make an impact, if I start making a difference, then I'll start gaining some traction, because people will see that I'm actually doing good.
right,
As you make an impact and a difference, then more people are going to be more attracted to you.
correct,
Then it's going to be easier to make more money. But starting out at
correct.
the beginning, don't think, oh my gosh, I'm just going to go out here, I'm going to get this $200,000, and
No,
half of it's going to be my salary.
no.
Right. So it doesn't work that way.
Doesn't work that way. And a lot of companies, they have more than one grant. Oftentimes, a company will be operating off of two or three or five grants at the same time, which is what allows them to be able to provide such larger services and to be able to hire people and to pay them, full salaries. Because let's make no mistake, nonprofits that are, funded and, are successful with grants, the people make a lot of money. They can make a lot of money, but there's a process to getting to that point, and that does not happen overnight.
Now, with that being said, let's talk about the importance of having a board.
Yes, you
Oh,
have to have a board.
yeah.
The first of all, according to the way that the government decides what a nonprofit is by definition, you are required. If you are a nonprofit, you are required to have a board. Without a board, you really are out of violation of being a nonprofit.
And so let's talk a little bit about that, though, because you can have to, when you're first starting off, like when I first started off, I had what I call my advisory board, because I couldn't
Hmm.
afford to pay anybody. But I had some people that believed in what I was doing, and they were willing to put their name on it. They were willing to say they were a part of it. And that gave me
Hmm.
some credibility. So can you
Correct.
talk a little bit about finding board members if you're just getting started? How would you recommend someone go about that?
Right. So, first of all, board members are really important because the goal or the position of a board member is to help create the strategic standing of the organization. The board is usually broader in their thinking. They're thinking about over the year, the next two, the next 5 years. What are the strategic things we need to do to make sure that this company continues to grow and work toward its mission? And that's usually what the board is doing. However, when you're just starting out, oftentimes board members are playing much more tactical roles because you need those bodies to support the foundational growth and development uh, in a way that's a little bit more hands on. And so the board, in terms of finding people to be on boards, there's a lot of different ways to go about it, but there are certain organizations like Volunteer Match that allow people to express their interests. And some people create profiles where they say, hey, I'm looking for board positions. And so you can go to organizations or online platforms like a Volunteer Match to find people who are looking for board membership. A lot of times, though, when people are starting or brand new, they will identify people within their circle, maybe close friends, to be on the board. But I will say this: what's important about a board is that you have people who have certain strengths and expertise and skills. Because after all, a nonprofit is a business, and businesses work on finance, the fiduciary piece, marketing, administration, communication, outreach, education, and all of these are the various different prongs that hold up any organization and nonprofits. And so you want people on your board who has experience in those different areas so that they can provide guidance. Because if you just pick people to be on the board who don't have certain skill sets that you need, then you won't get the direction and the guidance that's necessary for you to succeed.
Yeah, and your board is also your network that goes out and supports the organization by bringing other people into it, meaning they may have friends that can make donations.
Correct.
They may have the, as you say, the expertise in certain areas that you don't have. So it's extremely important to put together that board, or I'll call it the team. You got to have a team
Mhm.
to make a nonprofit work, and that's really what it's all about.
And I do want to add this though. I think that it's about, managing expectations as well. Because oftentimes people desire to get involved, whether it's on a board level or whether it's on a more day-to-day, getting the business operations, moving forward. But the amount of time that people can dedicate and commit, it varies, it changes. So while one person may be able to be available 3, 4 days a week, another person may only be available 3 or 4 days a month. And so understanding that and having clarity on the people who are helping work on this nonprofit, be it staffing, volunteers, or boards, understanding that everybody has a capacity and a limited amount of time, and understanding those limits and those capacities are key, because I cannot tell you how many times things go haywire because there's a need that the company has, but the people involved, they don't have the capacity to give the time that may be needed, which is why you have to either recruit more volunteers, more people to be on board. But those are things to think about as well.
Mm, yeah, good tips. Good tips. Now, if someone were interested in learning more about starting and running a nonprofit, is that something that a service that you offer?
Yes, I am definitely able to, provide people with the foundational tools and information that they need to start a nonprofit, as well as a list of resources and other things that could be helpful as well. Absolutely.
And how can people find you online?
Oh man, you can find me all over the place. Of course, you can go to Instagram. I'm Don Gatewood one. So Don Gatewood one, the number one. So that's my Instagram. But then on Facebook, I'm Don Brien Gatewood, DonBrien Gatewood, Gatewood. So those are two ways to reach me on social media. And of course, a person can listen to my podcast, the Leadership and Professional Development with Don Gatewood. And we actually recently did an episode on starting a nonprofit. That was actually one of my earlier episodes. So I talk about that, and we'll continue to talk about it as well. So those are the ways that people can reach me. And my email, gatewooddon@gmail.com. Gatewooddon@gmail.com. I would love to hear from people if they have questions, thoughts, need feedback, information. I am a coach and I do provide coaching services. So absolutely.
Outstanding. So now I just want to give you an opportunity for your final thoughts for the audience as we want to just kind of focus on nonprofits and getting started with. So whatever information you'd like to just share as we close, feel free to put that out there right now.
I just want to say, for every person who has ever thought about starting a nonprofit, I honor you, because we need more people to be mindful of the needs of our community. And the fact that you're even thinking in that way is so honorable and so needed. The first thing to do is to think about your capacity to put into a nonprofit, because it is very timely. And oftentimes they look easier because they're well ran and they're oiled and they've gone through the ringer, but it's a lot of time. And so the first thing is to go and find out what other people who are similar in passion and interest, go find out what other organizations are doing, maybe even volunteer to get a strong foundation there. And once you do that and find out that you want to do it, think about who's going to do this with you. Will it be alone, or will it be with a group of people? How will you start this? And once you make that determination, then you're in a position to decide, well, what is a realistic plan for me? Because I'm only going to be doing it by myself. I didn't got 7 people to help me. So I can't do whatever on a grand scale, do it on a small scale, because that is what my capacity is. So being realistic. And then making sure that everything that you do, the impact that you make, that you save that, you chronicle it. And the way that people are chronicling these things is on their website, on their social media. They're keeping track of what they're doing because this is the information that people are going to look at to determine if you're legit, if they want to support you. And this is the information you'll need to write those grants. So that's just the basic information that I would want to share. But keep in mind with the nonprofit, essentially, it is a business. You need financial literacy to manage those books and those accountings and pay the bill like any other company. It is no different. You need the marketing plan to make sure that people know what the agency is and aware of the events you got going on. Is no different than any other company. You need people with good faith, good attitudes to be the face of the organization so that people can believe and trust you. Is no different than an organization. So what I'm trying to say is all those things that make an organization successful, that's exactly what you need on the nonprofit. Maybe a smaller scale, but those are the exact same things you need. And just think about that. And if you feel that you can achieve those goals and those points that I talked about, then you may be in the position to start one and be successful at doing so. But it takes time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Don, I just want to say thanks, man, for showing up on Shadow the Stereotypes because you are definitely doing that. I appreciate you and the information that you shared.
Thank
My
you.
hope is that anyone watching this who may have been thinking about starting a nonprofit, contact Don. Let him, he's been there. He knows how to do this stuff. So
I do. Yeah. Contact me. I'm here.
find people who knows how to do stuff, and he knows how to do stuff when it comes to nonprofits. So again,
Yeah.
Don, thank you so much for hanging
Thank
out
you.
with us for an hour. We really appreciate it, and I wish you continued success in everything that you're doing, my friend.
Thank you so much.
All right, so this has been another episode of Shadow the Stereotypes, and what's really important is find that thing that you're passionate about. Whatever it is that you're passionate about, and sink your heart and soul into it. Because if you're passionate about it, you have a deep love and a deep drive to make it happen. Anything is possible. You can create a nonprofit, you can create a profit, whatever it is, but find that thing that lights you up. That's why I do this show. I love doing this show because I know that it makes a difference. It exposes Black men to other Black men who are doing remarkable things in the world. So I have this desire to share brothers that are doing remarkable things. And so I'm driven by that desire to make a difference. So find something that you love, that you're passionate about, and then figure out how you can get it out into the world. You can do it. I have faith in you. We'll see you next episode. Take care.